Hello, hello, and welcome back to Growing Yourself Through Plant Wisdom. This is Tigri La Gardenia, your nature-inspired leadership mentor and world ambassador for plant intelligence. So how are you enjoying the series so far? I would love for you to give me some feedback. Please leave me a comment or you can send me an email. I just want to hear how you are experiencing. What was it like in that last exercise? What did you get out of it? So if you remember in the second video of this series, we talked about what you need to start building confidence in your plant communication. And this was after in the first video, we talked about how to really flourish your fullest self through plant guidance. What is it that the plants really want us to know about this two-way conversation that we need to start with them? And then more importantly, how do we actually start communicating with them? So we went through a whole exercise of this. Here we are in our third video, and this video is all about 3 steps plants want you to take in these challenging times. This is really to accelerate our evolution. Remember, as I said in the first video, plants are actually co-evolving with us, and they have been the entire time that humanity has been here. Plants have actually been coexisting with us, but more importantly, co-evolving. For example, many of the houseplants that we have in our homes were originally sometimes tropical plants or plants that grew in completely different environments. As humans decided that they wanted to bring some of these plants closer with them, and I'm sure actually with a little bit of nudging from the plants themselves, the plants had to adapt to their new environments. So even plants that we think of as maybe plants that are okay to have in the shade or plants that are great to have indoors in areas that maybe don't get a lot of sun, believe it or not, plants like a spider plant and sometimes even pothos themselves, which is two really common houseplants, were actually tropical plants that in certain species that still grow wild, grow in full sunlight outdoors. So this is how much plants want to be with us. You know, peace lilies, sansevieria, the spider plant, as I mentioned, these are all plants that have been little by little adapting themselves in order for them to live within our ecosystem, the ecosystem inside of our home. And this way they can have an even closer relationship with them. So you see spider plant here with me, and if you've taken my mini voyage with plants, you know that spider plant is one of my biggest collaborators. So in this particular video, I want to talk about those 3 steps. I want to talk about what the plants are talking about in these times. What is it that we really know? How can I myself and others use the plant wisdom that we're receiving in our lives, in our professions? What are 3 major things they want us to know that are really going to transform the way we interact with them as well as with the planet at large? These are practical examples, practical advice that you can use in your connections with plants for the greater good, because once you establish this connection, you're going to see that things in your life are going to continue to change. You're all of a sudden going to recognize parts around you, things around you, objects, experiences, sensations that you didn't see before. And this is because a greater awareness of plants, a lifting of the plant blindness, starts to show us that other 85% of the biomass in ways we never experienced before. So here are 3 steps that plants really want you to take right now for your evolution and for the co-evolution that we're having together. Okay, these are the most important behaviors on a personal as well as a collective level that you can encourage and take to stabilize what's happening around us, to give it a meaning, to make an impact, to be a part of it. Because remember that in nature, you are an observer, you are a participant, but most importantly, and the part we forget the most, is that you are nature. So what I want these 3 tips to really help you remember is those 3 sets of beings. You are nature, you observe nature, and you participate in nature. Nature is not outside of us. Plants in and of themselves are not outside of us. We share a lot of DNA. We share a lot of characteristics. And when we start to recognize this, they become trusted allies to help us in our evolution. Okay, so step number 1, stop. Really, I'm not kidding. I've said this before. They keep screaming it at me. Stop, stop, stop. You are so busy running around and looking and thinking about all the things you're missing out on that you're missing out on the things that you're actually doing. This is not the way the plant world operates. The plant world is, as I said, sessile. Remember, we talked about this in the first video. They don't run around just for the sake of running around. Every movement is calculated based on the amount of energy that they have, based on what they can achieve, and based on the goals that they have. Now, sometimes they exert themselves, they go beyond and they take a risk, and sometimes they even fail. I mean, we see this. We see plants have a certain kind of mutation, some new color that comes out, or appendage, or a leaf structure, and sometimes they're not able to do what it is that they need. And at that point, that particular maybe individual might lose that limb, or they might even lose in that particular moment. But on an evolutionary level, that is a trial and error that is calculated to ensure that the overall species can still survive. So they are stopping, they're evaluating, they're using that observation, they're in that moment being observers of nature, and then when they've observed and they've chosen a path to take, which could be again a trial and error perspective. But the most important thing, that it's a conscious choice. And right now, you're not making conscious choices. You're running around really trying to accomplish 1,000 different things, and you're not enjoying the things that you actually have accomplished. When we do, and we go looking through the literature and we see studies on ancient prehistoric humanity, we discover that prehistoric humanity spent the largest part of their day either sleeping or in contemplation. Now, we might think hunters and gatherers were probably living in fear, they weren't going to have enough food, but it's actually not true. Their relationship with nature ensured that they knew where to go, and we hear this about indigenous cultures, right? They're so connected to their land that they know where the food is, they know where the animals are, they know where to go. It's only the disturbances to the sound and all of this modern sides of us that have brought in anxiety. But before, they actually knew where they were headed. And so they had plenty of time to get there, collect what they needed, and then sit in contemplation. And it is in contemplation that you get your best ideas. That's why meditation really works, right? Meditation is that conscious contemplation. It's that stopping and listening to yourself so that your true nature can guide you along the way. Because if we were to listen to our internal guidance, we'd be flowing with our own nature rather than fighting against it and therefore feeling like you're always kind of behind. So stop and take the time that you really need in order for you to bring in what it is that you're doing, what direction you should take, and actually choose the most efficient and quick way to get there. Because if you take that extra time, then you are going to get there. Now, you might have a failure along the way, and that's okay, because if you've contemplated for that failure, if you thought about the possibility of that failure, you will understand how to learn from it so that you can be better. But if instead you've just haphazardly done something, then when you fail, you learn nothing from it. And so you're eventually going to fail again. And if you are really worried about all the things that you want to get done in the day, let me tell you something. You can't do them. You are going to miss out on things, and that's okay. It's okay for you to miss out on certain activities, on certain experiences, on certain moments, if you truly enrich yourself with the ones that you do. So the first thing is to stop, contemplate, enjoy that sense of awe and wonder, and celebrate where you are and what you have accomplished, and then choose the strategy consciously that you want to do to go forward. So that's number one. Number two is about looking at new models. The plant world right now is vibrant. I talked to so many people that have told me that they might have had a connection when they were younger, or maybe they've heard plants but they weren't really listening. And they are so excited right now to be able to hear, to be able to experience, to sense the wonders of the plant world. Most importantly, because plants have a different logic. They have new models. So when we go to look at nature in general as a model for our development, they can help us better understand the world that we live in and the things that we want to accomplish. Because right now we're in a time where we're building in ways that we never even contemplated before. There are things happening in our planet that we never have ever experienced. It's not a repetition of the past that we know of, but there are pieces of it that are repetitions of past that they know. And so therefore, when we go and we look at the way the plant world has adapted to their situations, we can look and find new models. Because wasn't it Einstein that says that you can't fix a current problem using the same logic that created it? So the plant world has solved so many problems. They have solved and evolved past so many different types of situations. They have different models. Plus, like I said in the first video, when we integrate human logic with plant logic, we have the opportunity to create even more new models. And this is exactly what they want, because even they are experiencing some parts of our planet right now that are never before seen. And therefore, they need human logic and plant logic to work together. Animals, plants working together to create solutions. Last year, there was a period in my life where I was told, nothing you have been doing is going to continue to work, and the new solutions aren't going to be there. So you just need to stop, contemplate, and wait until it comes. And you need to look for new models. You need to be open to things that you've never experienced before. You need to allow yourself to try new ways of thinking and of doing. And can I tell you that there was a moment in that moment of contemplation when all of a sudden everything just clicked into place. And this is because the plant world handed me a mirror. They directed me where I needed to go to see something I had never before seen in order for me to solve a given problem. So allow them to be a guide, then initiate a two-way conversation so that you turn that model into something that works in the human world as well as in the plant world. Number 3 is focus on the ecotone. An ecotone is a boundary between, it's a transition between one ecosystem and another. It's two biomes that touch together and they overlap each other. So for example, you have the area between land and sea. We call it the beach, right? We have the area between a field and a forest. It's not 100% forest, it's not 100% field. Now, in the world, in the natural world, there are no strong divisions. It's not like agriculture where you clear the field, you plant your plants, and then all of a sudden forest starts or a meadow starts or something else, and there's a clear delineation. Instead, in the natural world, there is a transition, and this area of transition is called an ecotone. And an ecotone is where the most biodiverse, the most resilient, the most adaptive species live. This is an area filled with tension, but the good tension, that kind of tension that's exciting because there's always things moving because you have this edge effect that happens between the two of them. So individuals and communities in the ecotones have to constantly be adapting to new ideas, to unique features that come up because there is a transition point. And if you look in there, you can see so many new ways to do things. You can actually take the best of both worlds and run with it. You can create models that really allow us to understand how to keep growing the amount of biodiversity that we have, the diversity in general, in order to actually have resilience. So I'm going to give you an example from my own life. So many of you know I'm Cuban American. I grew up in South Florida, in Miami, or as we call it, North Cuba. And one of the things I love about Miami is the fact that we as Cubans came in such a large number that we didn't have to hide our identity. Many, unfortunately, immigrant cultures have a tendency to let their culture and their identity go away, like kind of especially out in public, and only maintain small amounts of it. Instead, what happened in Miami at the time that I was growing up was an amazing ecotone where Cuban culture and American culture started to merge together. And there we saw a flourishing of biodiversity, of diversity between thoughts and ideas of way of doing. So much so that the Cuban community is considered the fastest adapting immigrant community in all of the United States. This means we've entered into politics faster than any other immigrant community has ever done, in large numbers of business owners, large numbers of entrepreneurs, high level education. We moved into all of this because we never lost our language, but we completely learned the new language. My mother, who came to the United States when she was in her mid-20s, speaks perfect English. but she also speaks perfect Spanish. And my brothers and I all are the same. We never lost either one of them. We celebrate Cuban holidays, we celebrate American holidays. We take the best of both of our cultures and we use them when appropriate. We were taught that you should never hide, but you should accentuate and use them. One doesn't diminish the other. This is an ecotone. And from that, we can learn a lot about how immigrant cultures can come into new cultures and keep the original identity of the culture that was originally there, while also embracing fully the new culture that's coming in. This is a great example of an ecotone. And I'm sure you have many others. If you think about the way that you're going to be working in business, business is no longer the big giant marketing department that works with the big giant development department. There's mixtures and ecotones that are happening in here. We see it in the way that we structure even our services. Many of the entrepreneurs that I work with in my one-on-one work is all about ecotones. They have multiple, they're supporting edge communities. They're supporting areas where you have two completely different ecosystems that need to work together. And this is super important because the truth of the matter is that this overlap is where the most of our systems designs comes from. This is where we can make massive change. Because when you recognize that your ecosystem, even if you're in the middle of your ecosystem, flows, has an edge case where it starts to adapt to another ecosystem and creates this ecotone and then flows into another one, you can see the impact of your work across many others. I recently watched a video presentation by Fritjof Capra, who is a systems designer and a really amazing modern thinker, who was talking about the fact that he did an entire analysis, his team, not really just him, to be honest, there was this entire team, did an analysis where they came from situations like Black Lives Matters and the systematic racism that we've seen in the United States, for example, and they've traced it back from a design perspective, from an eco perspective of how it touches the COVID-19 situation. So these types of seemingly totally distinct ecosystems and situations in reality flow from one to the other. If you focus on the ecotones, on the locations where they start to overlap one on the other, you're going to see a greater amount of personal as well as interactive growth. And that's exactly what we want right now. We need to start thinking in systems and designs, and we need to see how our individual actions impact the communities that we're in and how our communities impact other communities. So the plant world wants us to understand that these ecotones, these places and the margins in between are super important right now, because if we nourish them, they will in turn nourish the two ecosystems that happen on each side. So your three top steps Plant Sweaty to take right now is: one, stop, contemplate, reflect and act from a conscious place. Two, look at new models. Allow yourself to let the old models sort of fall behind and be open to a new model that might be appearing. And three, focus on the ecotone. Look at the space and the margins of where your community and another community, where your business and another business, where your family and your friends. Look at how all of these interact to create synergies that are going to allow us to freely flow from one to the other with more harmony, with more resilience, and with more biodiversity. So that's video 3 of our 4-part series of growing yourself through plant wisdom. We have one more video coming up, and it's going to be video 4 of how you can really reconnect with plants and heal yourself and the planet through this reconnection. So keep an eye out for video 4. I look forward to speaking to you again. This is Tigrila Gardenia, your nature-inspired leadership mentor.